Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Charles Spinosa. He's a leadership expert, a management consultant for the last 27 years, has helped develop leaders, change organizational cultures, and develop customer propositions. He is also an author, written several books. The latest is Leadership as Masterpiece Creation. We'll talk all about that. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you very much, AJ.
You're
I'm
welcome.
delighted
Welcome.
to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Charles. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about leading with purpose, purpose turning businesses into masterpieces. That we'll talk all about that. But before that, let's understand a bit about your journey, your background, Charles, so that people know from you directly who they are listening to.
Sure. Thank you very much, AJ. And I'm really delighted that I get a chance to meet your audience. Okay, so I'm Charles Spinosa. I've been a management consultant for the last 27 years. And exactly as AJ said, I started out helping my clients develop new customer propositions. And from that, I moved into helping them change their culture so that they could deliver on those customer propositions and helping leaders develop their leadership. And that's primarily what I've been doing. But I always did it on the basis of the background I had before that. And before management consulting, I was a professor. I taught Shakespeare for a while at Miami University. I was a Shakespearean. That's what I wrote my Ph.D. on. And then I started publishing a lot in philosophy, and I ended up teaching philosophy at UC Berkeley for a short while. At that point, I wrote a book, a sort of philosopher's view of innovation. And that led me into management consulting. And right from the very beginning in management consulting, my first engagement was with the leadership team at Cemex, which at that time was a medium-sized cement company that grew to be the third largest in the world. I brought the basic idea of a Shakespearean scholar about Shakespeare. And what is that? Shakespeare was the one that realized that people lived their lives were starting to live their lives at his time out of life stories. They were telling the story of their life as they lived, and they wanted most of all to make that valuable. And that's what Shakespeare's tragedies are all about. They're all about the tragic character trying to make his life valuable. And the only way in a tragedy you can prove it is by being willing to die for your life story. Now, in businesses, I was bringing the same message. What are you as a leader or as a leadership team doing to make your lives valuable? And what's the story you're telling? And how do you prove that you make it valuable? And in business, you prove that your story is valuable essentially by making customers lead good lives, enabling customers to lead good lives, enabling your employees to lead good lives, and enabling the owners to lead good lives. That's how you measure whether the story you have of yourself is making you valuable. And that's what I began with. And it's out of that beginning at Cemex that I helped more and more business leaders go beyond just leading good lives for themselves, for their customers, for their employees, but creating organizations that were what I called masterpieces that changed what we consider to be good lives. And by virtue of that change, enabling more people to lead good lives. And that's what a masterpiece does.
Right. So, you want to add something more, Charles? Carry on.
AJ, I can go on and on and on. I'll just say very quickly, again, creating a masterpiece comes from the humanities. A leader finds a moral anomaly in his industry or her company and resolves that moral anomaly. So it is all moral business right from the get-go to what I do today. I'll come back to that as you ask more questions.
Absolutely, absolutely, Charles. So this whole age of creating masterpieces, is it gone? Is it a bygone era? Or is it still happening or we are now considering is that utopian, not possible today? How should, as a normal person, common person, I should understand this?
Okay, I don't think it's gone today. You're right to say it's being challenged. And particularly in the business world. People right now, people like me, management consultants like me, business school professors, people who write about business, they're teaching two things to managers. They're teaching them, number one, to be agile. And what does that mean? It means you're constantly exploring, testing one idea, testing another idea, testing another idea, testing another idea, and constantly doing that. People, they love to say iterating and refining. And what do? Well, you test one customer idea, proposition. If it works, you speedily deliver something. As soon as it stops working, you test another and test another. You never ask yourself, what's really true about my customers? What is really giving them a good life? You can sell something for a short time that doesn't give your customers a good life, that doesn't give your employees a good life. But you don't ask that question when you're agile. You sell when you can sell. When it starts to die off, you experiment and invent, try something else and try something else and try something else. And that's agility and that's pragmatism. And that doesn't give you masterpieces. What it does is it gives you fast change. You become a fast change artist. And that's one direction that a lot of businesses are going in. There's a famous writer who used to be a co-author of mine, Don Sull, who's written a lot about that. If you're interested in that, Don Sull's the place, the person to read. I believe that, well, personally, I believe there's some people who just find that exciting. I think for most people, we tend to burn out on that. And the burnout is measured by the other big tendency in business, which is to try to keep everything safe. So you don't take risks, you're just constantly experimenting. That's another thing that Agile likes. It's one small experiment after another one, after another one. When it works, it just takes off. I think that that is not what many of our business leaders are doing today or have done. For instance, Ray Dalio, who runs the Bridgewater hedge fund, he has invented an organization that is very distinctive. And what makes it distinctive? Inside it, people are constantly seeking for what's true and saying what's true to each other all the time. In fact, he developed, way before WhatsApp and all the applications we have now, a technology where people during meetings would get comments from other people on what they thought, what their assessments were of how the meeting was going, how the person was performing. And that's what Ray Dalio is famous for. The anomaly, the moral anomaly he noticed was that our world was becoming more and more transparent. And how were people responding to everything being online? Well, they were cultivating images of themselves. They were cultivating images of themselves on Facebook. They were cultivating images of themselves in all sorts of social media. He said, why not turn transparency into a place where we're seeking truth, stating what we believe to be true, having people object or agree or challenge, and then have that kind of conversation on social media, much like what we're doing right now with AJ. And he made that the basis of his management. I consider Bridgewater a masterpiece business. It hasn't started changing the rest of the world yet, but I believe it will ultimately replace radical candor and psychological safety. You're always taking a risk at Ray Dalio's business. So there's one. Another one that is a bit more controversial is Bezos's Amazon. What happened there? Bezos realized in the early days of the internet that retail, selling things online, was very, very crazy. It was like everybody negotiating prices for everything. You would sell unfinished goods, you'd sell finished goods. There was no quality control. There was plenty of room for fraud. And Bezos happened to love the basic trust between a buyer and a seller that we had in the world. And he set out to create something that would save that basic trust and in the world and be online and have all the advantages of the online world. And that was what we know as Amazon, an everything store. Now, to achieve that, to go up against Walmart and so forth, he had to develop a relentless culture inside, a culture where he was constantly raising the bar on employee requirements and fanaticism about customers. And those were three rough values. And in fact, he had to end up firing what people thought rather cruelly, his founding employees, to make the point. We really are going to be relentless here. We really are going to raise the bar all the time. We really are going to be fanatical about customers. And in doing that, he created an online world where he preserved trust between buyers and sellers, and invented alongside that, out of his relentlessness, the kind of hyper-convenience we have today. And that's a real shift in our retail moral order, as I call it. We now expect everything to be really as convenient. We know it's not going to be as convenient as Amazon. We know we don't have everything that we can purchase and purchase it at the click of a key, have it delivered the next day, and if we don't like it, return it right away. It's not going to be that convenient, but we really do expect, even as we go to our favorite restaurants down the street, our favorite museums, that they are going to give us some hyper convenience, that's going to be part of what they deliver. And that's how people create masterpieces and how masterpieces change communities. It's a kind of moral effort.
Absolutely, absolutely, Charles. So where is it that people have gone wrong? Where is that? Is it that some leaders have gone wrong? Is it that only some readers are actually, some of these leaders are actually good readers and read the right kind of Shakespeare, and most of them have read the wrong kind of Shakespeare about Lady Macbeth, ambition, where let not the knife see the wound it makes, and then everybody is happy because nobody comes to know about the wound. And we have come, our planet has come to this state. The leadership itself is in crisis. Organizations have become toxic workplaces. We have the great resignation. We have the quiet quitting. We have the revenge quitting. Why is it? Where have you got? Do they have to read the right kind of books? Which books? We will come to also your book, Leadership as Masterpiece Piece Created. But first, let's understand, where have we gone wrong?
Okay, I believe we've gone wrong. I'm going to make a very bold statement, and I might want to take a bit of it back, but I think in essence it's right. We have gone wrong in understanding business through social science instead of understanding business through the humanities. What does that mean? We train business leaders to think of their businesses as machines or as rational bureaucracies. And their goal is to find pragmatic techniques for increasing revenue and growth, increasing profits, and getting good scores on employee satisfaction. And one of those good ways you get a good score on employee satisfaction is by having a so-called purpose that you attach your business to. And a purpose doesn't necessarily mean something coming from your heart. In fact, it usually doesn't come from your heart. It comes from what journalists are talking about today. It's a purpose, it's a fashionable purpose to attach your business to. And when you start there, and you're using the social sciences, what you're doing is you're basically manipulating variables. And that's what a lot of consulting, a lot of business thinking is about. How do we create the right environment for employees to be productive? How do we test products with customers to see if the customers are willing to buy more or buy the next upgrade? And it's all like a social science experiment. There's very, very little question about how do I create a good life for my employees? How do I create a good life for my customers? Now, I say there's very little in the training. There's very little in what most managers believe they're supposed to do. In my 27 years of consulting and working with leaders, I would say I have only run into two who really deep in their hearts believed that. Now, that's what their training was, and that's what they tried to do, and that's what they thought they should do to perform. But all but two, and I haven't counted, but it must be 50, had a sense of what the right way to treat customers was, what the right way to treat employees was, what the right way to treat suppliers and owners was, and they wanted to do it. But all their training said you're going to end up losing money. Or, here's the big one, it's too risky. We only take calculated risks in our business. We use game playing analysis to decide what risks to take. One of my basic questions when I go into a business is to ask the leader, what are you always doing wrong in your own organization or in your industry? And I just wrote down the most recent 7 I had. What's amazing is almost every leader has an answer to that question. You would think, and you would think that people wouldn't take that seriously, or if it's something that's wrong, it's not something that always goes wrong. It's something that periodically goes wrong, and they correct. That's how managers think. Managers are constantly firefighting. They're constantly correcting things. But here are the last 7. We engage in secret. This is from a business outside the U.S. and outside Europe. We engage in secretive financial practices, not ones that have first world transparency. We always do this. We always get caught up doing it, and we can't then borrow money at low interest rates and grow that way. We always get this wrong. Another one, we always treat our loyal customers poorly. We're offering all our best deals to new customers to get the new customers in the door. Another one from a utility industry. We always look for big engineering projects to solve our problems. We never partner with our customs. And this one, I can say it was the water industry. They partnered with their customers to collect water running off of roofs and things so that they could manage wastewater far better. It was far cheaper for everybody, and the customers actually enjoyed doing it. Another one, we negotiate win-lose contracts with our contractors. We know that win-win's better, but we always get caught up negotiating win-lose. Another one in healthcare. It's really the insurance company that's a customer of the doctors. This is U.S. healthcare, by the way. It's really the insurance company that is the customer of the doctor. We need to get the patient as the customer. We have to find a way to do that, but we don't. Another, video games. We create macho video games. We know that we can create video games that appeal to women too, and appeal to a diverse community. But we only create macho games because that's our practice. And another one, actually this was the one that helped me turn the corner and see masterpieces. We're so safety conscious, we don't innovate here. I love innovation, but there's no way to do it. So those are just 7 of the last leaders I dealt with, and what they saw was always going wrong in their industry. Now, changing that is not just a manager's thing to do. Changing that is risky. People are going to think that you're doing something wrong when you try to change that. And that's the hard thing. Really, the hardest question I ask leaders, once I get this, is what would you love to do? And that is the question that they find so hard. What would you love to do? And that is the real place where I believe the injury of the lack of humanities training causes. They have a hard time saying what they would love to do. They haven't read Shakespeare. They haven't read Milton. They haven't read Homer. They haven't read the Bhagavad Gita. They haven't read the things that inspire huge imaginative develops. They haven't developed what I call their moral imagination, which is the capacity that you find in literary writers and also philosophers to look at the world from an entirely different perspective, to look at the world, say, from what it looked like in the 18th century or the 19th century, or my favorite period, the Renaissance, the 16th century. When you begin looking at the world that way, you begin to see new things. Can I give you one little story about what that's like?
Of course.
Okay. When I was a professor, one of the things I would teach students first studying English literature was Chaucer. Chaucer was a poet from the Middle Ages in England, and he wrote a tale called The Franklin's Tale. I won't go into it. It's a love story with a knight and a lady. We can all imagine that. And the lady puts the knight through various tasks, and they get married. It's a happy story with a happy ending. And I always ask the students why the lady married the Lord, the knight. And the students would always give me the answers about what they believed in romantic love. Well, he would make a good partner for her. He showed that he was devoted and would stick with her, and so on. But Chaucer has it just stated right in the tale. She fell in love with him because she pitied him. And I show them the line, and they say, "Oh, Chaucer must have been asleep at the wheel. He didn't really mean that. We all know that you don't love someone whom you pity. That's impossible." And I say, try assuming that is right. What do you see then about the whole nature of the story? And the whole nature of the story is she was putting him through arduous tasks. She was like on a romantic pedestal, like a goddess. And yes, goddesses do pity people. She was a goddess. It was a religious pedestal. After all, these were religious times. And romantic love was understood as like religious love. When you see that, it's, oh man, oh wow, that's completely different. And then you can take your students through not just understanding Chaucer, but how that kind of love was alive in our culture right up through the 1960s and is still alive with some people today. And guess what? If you're a business selling vacations to lovers, selling jewelry to lovers, selling other things to lovers, there is that segment, which you'll never understand if you think that all love is partnership love. There is that romantic segment left, and it opens your eyes to that. So it's that eye-opening sense that you get from the humanities, from trying to understand literature from the past, understanding literature from other cultures, that then you see the world as a richer place. And then you can answer the simple question that a consultant like me says, okay, so you produce macho video games. You, in fact, were one of the people who developed World of Warcraft. Now you realize you want to do something. What would you love to do? I would love to create a video game that men and women love to play. Okay, well, let's start there. What risks are you going to have to take to get there? And that, by the way, is the next step on the journey. Once you can get people actually to see what they'd love, and that's what I say, I have to basically do some humanities training to get them there, to enrich their moral imagination. The next step is taking the risks to do it. And those risks, that's what the heart of leadership as masterpiece creation about. Those moral risks, as I call them, that's then what leaders have to do. And that is the mark of leadership, the capacity to do something that people are going to see as wrong now, to fire those employees, to take that money from something that looks like the money should go to, everybody agreed it should go to, and put it in this risky venture. Or even to hire people that people will tell you can't be hired because they don't know anything about creating video games, but you need to hire people who can create video games that men and women will play. Those are the kinds of risky things that you then have to do. Sometimes the risks seem simple, but in various industries they're hard. We worked with a woman in the recruiting industry, Julia Robertson, in the UK. She, by the way, she created a masterpiece. She deserves to be far more famous than she is. The first, and in the recruiting industry, temporary workers, the idea was you just get the workers in and out as fast as possible. You don't treat the workers well. You work with companies that just want to move workers in and out as fast as possible without caring for workers. that was the nature of the industry. She thought that was unfair to everybody, that industry. But the first thing she imposed in her own company was people making promises, people simply promising to say what they were going to produce the next quarter, the next week, and then trying to keep those promises and renegotiating if they couldn't. In most companies, a lot of companies, and in her industry in particular, promises were for fools. Promises were ways that you created win-lose circumstances. You only got a promise from somebody if you wanted to win over them, beat them somehow. And so she had to fire rather harshly the people who wouldn't keep their promises in her company. And some of them were leaders. And those are the kinds of moral risks. Firing them harshly, that could have taken the whole company down. She could have been seen not as somebody who was trying to make lives good for people, but as someone who was trying to make lives bad for people. That was the risk she took, and she succeeded. So even simple things like that can be huge moral risks in a particular company.
Absolutely, Charles. Well explained. Now, should one focus on making leaders or leadership as masterpieces, or should they focus on making organizations, businesses as masterpieces? Where should the focus be? Because leaders will come and go and organizations will be there. Like for Amazon, if you go into Amazon, you adopt and adapt that culture.
I believe you can. I mean, it's an interesting case. Can you make a business into a masterpiece without making your leadership style into a masterpiece? I haven't found the case where you can. And the reason, I'll give you the reason. However, I am a kind of philosopher in the background. So I'm always testing this. I'm wondering, could you create a masterpiece without having to make your leadership into a masterpiece leader? And I can't give you a knockdown argument that you can. But this is what I find. In making your business into a masterpiece, you're going to have to take moral risks. And you're going to have to bring your team, or the majority of your team, along with you. When Bezos fired founding employees, he had to bring the majority of his team with it. When Anita Roddick from the Body Shop sold half the company behind the back of her CFO, she had to bring most of the people with her. You need to do that. Now, how do you do that when you're taking risks that people don't think make sense? They have to admire you. And the reason they have to admire you is because you exhibit virtues that they find very attractive. It can be a virtue of wisdom. It can be a virtue of loving your company, your employees. It can be a virtue of justice. It can be any one of the classic virtues, or it can be a virtue like Steve Jobs of inventiveness. But you have to build yourself and your leadership style around your virtues. And if you do that, you'll have a masterful leadership style that people admire. And then you can bring them along through the moral risk taking to create the company. Now, the virtues can be rather simple. Julia Robertson, whom I mentioned to you, who changed the recruitment industry. She was a nurturing leader. She nurtured her employees as much as she could. Now, we can say nurturing, that's sort of a mom-like virtue. That's not a leader-like virtue. It doesn't make any difference. If you push your virtue to the maximum, people will admire it, they can follow you, and they will follow you through those very difficult moments that you have to go through to create a masterpiece. If there is another way to create a masterpiece, AJ, where you don't have to do that, somebody write me and tell me. I haven't seen it. And I'll tell you this, lots of leaders would love to find, because they've been trained in social sciences, give me a recipe for being able to turn my business into a masterpiece where I don't also have to turn myself into a masterpiece. People would love it if they could find that. I don't think there is. That's one of the things I harp on in the book is we don't have roses without thorns. And one of the thorns is if you're going to create a masterpiece, you have to make yourself into a virtuous masterpiece to do it.
Absolutely. We'll come to your book, but first, help us understand. You talk about moral risk taking,
Yes.
and uh, how at the outset it sounds like something towards the negative, but I guess it means something positive. Help us understand what is this moral risk taking in leadership that you talk about, Charles.
Well, AJ, thank you for asking that. Uh, I'm going to try to give you the shortest answer I can, but that is the best question anybody could ask me about the book. And as I say, listen, let me say to you and your audience, I'm going to give the shortest, quickest answer I can. If you don't like it, if it doesn't make sense, send me an email, contact me through LinkedIn. I'll go on about this. I'll tell you where in the book you can find the answer. It's in chapter 6. Moral risk taking is a new idea, and and it's repellent to most ways of thinking about morality, because when you take a risk, luck is involved. You're successful by luck or by not, and we don't believe that anybody. We don't, in the first instance, believe that anybody can be good by luck or evil by luck. We believe that's who they are. It's deep in their character, in their habits, in their hearts. A philosopher named Bernard Williams, who recently died, said that's not right. We've really missed how we live morally. And he invented the story of Gauguin to show that. And Gauguin, for those of you who don't know European art, is a famous 20th century European artist, post-impressionist, an absolutely brilliant artist, and it'll come out as I tell the story. But here's Williams' story. Gauguin was a struggling artist in Paris with a wife and 5 children in a very bourgeois family, very, very middle class values. He had the intuition, and it was just a whim, that if he got out of his bourgeois surroundings, his middle class surroundings, he could paint some great art, some art that would be really valued around the world. Now, in the middle class, everybody's got whims like that, and you don't follow them. That's immoral. Well, in fact, he did. He abandoned his family. He ran off to Tahiti and painted the great art that we know Gauguin for. And if you don't know Gauguin's art, it's largely art of Tahitian women and Tahitian life. It's very earthy. It's erotic. It seems to people, it's laid back and easygoing. It doesn't have any of the middle class stresses in it. And in fact, for those of us who grew up with the art, it did change our view of what a middle class life was like. It opened it up a little. I recommend those of you who haven't seen Gauguin that you just look at some of Gauguin's art. It is amazing. And then Bernard Williams asked the question, did Gauguin do the right thing? And he asked it of people who appreciate Gauguin's art, people like me, who in fact were changed by Gauguin's art. And the answer is, if you really appreciate his art, you have to say he did the right thing. You can regret the fact that he hurt his family in doing it, but it's hard to say he did the wrong thing. And here's where the luck comes in. Suppose he ran off to Tahiti, lived an unrestrained life there, and produced no great art. How would you answer the question, did he do the right thing? You would say, no, he was a cad. He was a bad guy. He was a bad husband. He deserves to be punished. It turns out that if you create, I want to say, life-changing art, a masterpiece, in short, the moral actions that you took, or the seemingly immoral actions that you took, were really the right actions. It's not just an ends means thing, because in these cases, when you're facing a moral difficulty of the sort Gauguin faced, you don't really know if you can succeed. You don't know what the success will look like. It's really much more risky than just saying the ends could justify the means, or calculating the ends and saying they could justify the means. But that kind of moral risk actually binds us together more closely. And I won't take the time to explain how it does, but it makes us complicit with Gauguin. If we love the art, we have to excuse the wrong, and we, in fact, are complicit in that wrong, in him leaving his wife. And that is the way in which Bernard Williams says we're bound together. That is the moral lesson right in the middle of leadership as masterpiece creation. And that is the key moral lesson that I believe you learn from the humanities today that you can carry on into business. I apologize for anybody if I went through that too fast. That's the fastest way I know to go through it.
So we will certainly get a chance to talk much more on this, Charles. But while you were talking about, we were talking about the great artists, whereas some of these leaders, I can tell you, they are not artists, they are con artists, and I don't know how they can be, they can get to be masterpiece leadership, masterpiece in themselves. That's a very tough task, and many a time they invoke the name of great
they
people.
They do. Look, I write about Andrew Fastow in the book. Andrew Fastow was the CFO of Enron, and I consider these real evildoers like the evildoers in literature. And if you look at I haven't looked at all of them as a researcher, but I certainly looked at Andrew Fastow. And these are people who fall in love with their own genius in overcoming a moral anomaly. They're brilliant. They see a moral anomaly. They see the dark side of the moral anomaly, and they actually move to that. And that is how they create the evil that they create. Bernie Madoff, hugely evil. He saw the nature of trust. He saw how it was that people actually came to trust other people very deeply. And he manipulated it. He fell in love with his own genius in understanding trust so that he could manipulate that. And that happens. And that also shows you it's not just greed. That's the mistake. People think these people are just greedy. No, these people love the evil. They fall in love with the evil, and that's why they do it. The people that do these terrible things in business, I believe, could succeed without doing the things that are evil. I think it's a mistake. We're thinking it's just motivations. Somebody finds it easy to get a little extra money here, a little extra money there. They're greedy and they create a bad organization. No, the bad organizations, in my view, the ones that you described a moment earlier, that's because people have fallen in love with their genius. They can see a way to do it well. They can see a way to do it poorly, and they do it poorly. It's what St. Augustine told us about evil. He tells the story in his Confessions. He stole the pears from the neighbor, not because he was hungry and wanted pears. He didn't even like pears. He stole the pears from his neighbor because he saw that his neighbor was innocent and did not protect the pears. And that made them open to theft. And he did it for the pure joy of the evil of harming his neighbor. That's where evil comes from. That's what it's like. And that's how we have to counter it.
Absolutely. And that's how human nature is. That's the way we are made. We have to find good in ourselves and try to also see that evil does not take over our genius wherever we are.
There you are. A very important lesson from the humanities, not something that in social science you'll learn, because in social science it's all motives and incentives.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn from you. Charles, so much to learn from your book. Let's come to your book, Leadership as Masterpiece Creation. Tell us, who is this book for? Is it for the genius leaders? Is it for the evil leaders? Is it for the good leaders? Who is this book for?
Okay. For me, I think of it a little bit more simply than that, although I love your question. It is for the genius leaders, but not primarily for the genius leaders, either good or evil. It is for all the leaders that I tried to describe in the beginning. And that is the people that have a sense of what the right way to treat their customers is, what the right way to treat their employees is, what the right way to treat their owners is. And they're being told by everybody around them to follow a recipe, to scale up, to increase productivity and profits and so forth. And they're following recipes, but they think they're not doing the right thing. This book, the people that love the book that I love say, your book gives me permission to do what I've always wanted to do. It gives me, I mean, that's a little bit heartbreaking because I think it gives more than permission. Of course, it gives you permission to create a masterpiece, but it gives you lots of particular things to do to create a masterpiece and get yourself ready for it. People do give me credit for that, but the big thing they say is it gives me permission. So it's all those leaders between the small business owner who knows exactly what to do, who is creating a moral business, and the shapers. It's all of those people in the middle. That's the first thing. But you do not have to be the leader of a business. If you are even an employee, but if you're somebody who has any leadership aspirations, this book is for you. And the early chapters, I tell you things that you need to learn to be a morally imaginative leader that you can do in any role in your organization. You in any role can learn how to manage your mood. Bad moods are contagious. They harm an organization. Good moods aren't so contagious. But if you have a good mood and you can maintain a good mood and express it, you're doing something moral for your organization. Next step up, and this I took from a consultant named Fernando Flores, make promises. Don't just get an order from your boss and fulfill it. There's sometimes when you have to do it, but make a promise. Say, I'll get this to you by such and such a time. It'll be at such and such a quality. Make it moral. Just make it moral. The next one up, learn how to tell truth to power. You can do this at any level in the organization. Now, learning how to tell truth to power isn't just seeing what's true and blurting it out. People don't like that because you're essentially telling them they're wrong. To tell truth to power, you have to let the people in power know that you care for them. They need to know that you've really studied what you're talking about and thought about it. And they need to know that you care about the organization. You have to be able to show all those things when you say what's true. And if you do, odds are you'll get listened to. So those are things that you can do even if you're not in management. If you are in management, this book teaches you the moral questions that you face all the time. If you're a manager of any sort, do you stretch this employee? Do you push this employee hard? Or do you let off? And by the way, consultants, everybody who is advising people, every advisor, that's one of the basic questions in your life. Do I stretch this person further, harder, or not? And you need to be waking up in the middle of the night thinking, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? And the same thing. Are we treating customers as do-it-yourselfers, or are we treating customers as people who need lots of help? Where on the spectrum are they? How have I set things on that spectrum? Am I doing win-lose contracts with contractors? Even when I want to do win-win contracts with contractors, how do I get out of that? And by the way, I run into many people who want to do win-win, but the habits to do win-lose are so strong that it's almost impossible. You see an opportunity, you just take it. You can't help yourself. By the way, that's falling in love with your own evil. That's a version of it. So anybody who has any leadership aspirations, they can begin with the book and learn from it. The early chapters are basically stuff for anybody. By the time I get to the big deal moral risk taking and the strategies around moral risk, you do have to be the leader, at least of a division, to get that. And those are the last chapters of the book. And I think most people would want to know what it's like to be a leader, even if they can't use those skills right away. Thank you for asking that question, by the way, AJ. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. There is so much to learn from you about all these things, Charles, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more from you, about what you have been doing, what you do now, about your book, and so many other books that you have written. So what is the best way for them to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is right now through LinkedIn. It's Charles Spinosa, LinkedIn. It's pretty simple to get to me there. I answer email when people write me on email too. I'll say it, what the email is. The LinkedIn is the thing that's easy to remember, but charles.spinosa.phd@gmail.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed.
Can I tell them, please look at Amazon and purchase my book? I think it's inspiring. Okay.
Of course. I'll also add the link to the description and show notes. So with this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you all.